Before it was Eastern Kentucky University, the college, located in Richmond, Kentucky, was named Eastern Kentucky State Normal School. Established in 1906, the Normal School had the goal of training teachers in order to advance the education in Kentucky. On June 2, 1906, Roark Neville Roark was chosen to be the first president of the Normal School.
Roark wanted an inclusive university where women and minorities and people from the hills and hollers would be accepted and comfortable there. And he wanted to make a difference in his home state, help improve the great empire of Kentucky, I think he said. So when they promised him all that, he said, well, as long as Mary can teach, as long as I can build the curriculum, hire my own people, and really, see through this vision I've always had for Kentucky education. And they said, sure, no problem, come on, we really want you.
Mary Cregan was born in 1861, right at the start of the American Civil War. She attended Oberlin College in Ohio. Oberlin College was one of the first to allow women and minorities to attend. After receiving her bachelor's degree, Mary attended National Normal School in Lebanon, Ohio to get her teaching certificate. After graduating, the school hired her to teach, and one of her first ever students was Roark Neville Roark. After finding that they had much in common, Mary Cregan and Roark Neville Roark got married in 1881.
They were both very invested in improving education and in co-ed education, and they had a vision for how it should be. Because back at that time, jails and barns were in better condition than many of the schools. During that time, Laura Clay, around 1888, starts the Equal Rights Association of Kentucky, which is advocating for women's rights. Well, that's right up Mary's alley. I mean, she is all for it, and she becomes kind of the poster child for finding a woman who's articulate in higher education to go out and help with the rallies, with the lectures, to lobby legislators, to write articles, and things like that. Well, who better than Mary Roark, because that's her thing.
Roark got sick. Mr. Roark got sick in February of February of 1909. He had to go up to Cincinnati for medical treatment.
There was much discussion on who would take over as acting president in Roark's place.
The Board of Regents, for some reason, I have not why, Mrs. Roark was appointed acting president. Well, April in 1909, Mr. Roark dies of brain cancer.
Who do they come to continue being the acting president? Mary, because what do you think they talked about at the dinner table? They talked about education and programs and how to make the normal school better and recruit students. So she was the logical and the only choice to fill in for him.
Mary, although grieving for her late husband, continued changing the school for the better.
So she did a lot of things, started Sullivan Hall for women, added on, expanded Roark, the building, named for her husband and hopefully for her because she really deserved it as well. Saw that, along the way from construction to completion. That was for classrooms, for office building and offices to be housed there. And she signed the first diplomas of the graduates.
Not only did Mary and Roark Roark advocate for women's rights, they also wanted to provide a school where the people of rural Kentucky could come and improve their education.
So, wow, I mean, she just, still Dean of Women, doing all of that, still a couple kids at home. I mean, who could really step up and do all that in that time frame?
While advocating for educational reforms, Mary was also raising 4 children who would also go on to create change. All 3 of her sons would go on to get their PhDs, one posthumously.
And then the daughter, Kathleen, gets a degree. She's teaching in Georgia at one point and actually resigns under protest of parents because she spoke out against the KKK, and she was teaching evolution at a time where that wasn't even under discussion. So kind of a rebel rouser herself, but these are things she believed in and she was outspoken.
And I was looking through this 5 decades of progress, and I see Mary Roark. There was a picture of her as acting president. I said, whoa, that's really interesting. I said, she's acting president and she couldn't even vote. Well, I sent it to my boss, who endorsed the idea, at least he told me he did, and it was sent to the president, who was named J.C. Powell. Well, I didn't hear anything for a couple of years. I didn't know what, didn't hear a thing. Fast forward about 4 or 5 more years, we had Dr. Hanley Funderburk to come in to president, and I felt that he would never support the idea, so I did not bring it up to him. After Dr. Funderburk retired, we selected Robert Custra, who was lieutenant governor from Illinois, and he came here, and I thought he would look favorably toward bringing her up, and I mentioned it to him, and it never was brought up, but when he was installed, they rang the bells for all the presidents we had. I wasn't at the event, but they apparently rung a bell for her.
In 2001, Joanne Glasser was selected as Eastern Kentucky University's 10th president.
All the propaganda comes out from Eastern that she's the first female president and all this type of stuff, which of course I didn't believe, and of course I never talked to her about Mrs. Roark at all. I'm not sure she even realized Mrs. Roark even existed. But it was obvious if I tried to bring it up to her, she never would have pushed that to the Board of Regents, because that would have made her number 2, and she wouldn't have liked that, I don't think.
In 2013, Eastern Kentucky University's current president, Michael Benson, was chosen.
And I mentioned to him about Mary Roark, and he seemed very interested. Well, it seemed like a year or so later, there was a president of the Student Government Association, and he felt very strongly, from the students' perspective, that she also should be named officially as president. So Dr. Benson had me, an old faculty member who knows the history of the institution, coming at him in one direction, and then the student coming at him in the other direction, so it was a perfect storm. It came together. And basically, myself and the student were asked to appear in front of the Board of Regents. Now, I'd long since retired, and to talk about why Mrs. Roark should be officially named president. And then I ended my talk by saying, you all have the power to do this, and justice must be done. This woman needs to become officially a president of the university.
The legacy of Mary Roark would have been forgotten if it wasn't for the dedication of those such as Marie Mitchell and Charles Hay. Her progressive ideas regarding women and civil rights, as well as educational reforms, would have been lost in the past.
105 years for them to drop the acting and put her up in prestige with the other presidents and finally hang her portrait with the other presidents.
And I'm so proud that it took me 35 years to have it accomplished. I think a lot of people probably would have given up, but I never did. I had that in her mind, and it had to be the right person who was president. And he was the right person.
She smiled a lot. I mean, that says volumes to me. She smiled a lot. She liked what she was doing. She liked the students. She was seen walking around campus. She was really accessible. Sometimes at night, she was in her little buggy, pulled by a horse, and the kids would all chant to her or call out her name. But from every indication, she just did this remarkable job, and very selfless and loved by the students, and highly educated for a woman at the time.